We get a lot of questions about butchering chickens over here on the podcast. And those questions range from I have a backyard flock and I would like to be able to cull a few hens and some roosters every year, all the way up to we're planning to raise enough meat birds for ourselves and our neighbors, and we need to know what tools we need to get started on that. In this episode, I'm going to do my best to get you comfortable with the idea of butchering a few hens on your kitchen counter and reassure you that you have every tool you need. And it really is a simple and straightforward process, but there is a learning curve and it is worth learning. This is an ancestral skill that used to be fairly familiar to many people. If you have read many older books, you know they're always butchering this, that, or the other chicken, and it doesn't even barely make a comment in the book because it is such a simple and familiar process to people in the days of old. We will cover the tools that you need for both a simple few birds a year all the way up to the larger batches that involve more equipment. We'll talk about involving your kids in the process, and we will talk about the cleanup and packaging process at the end as well. I hope that you find this episode to be very useful and interesting. And please be aware that we are going to talk about all the blood and guts in this episode, and it is appropriate for all ages, but do be aware before you jump in. Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast with Allison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Allison. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm looking forward to learning lots in this episode, which I'm sure I won't be the only one listening who will. Picking your brains. How are you?
I'm good. I'm staying warm. I got my Scottish wool blanket on, my fuzzy bathrobe on top of my clothes and my wool socks, and I am ready to visit with you for the next hour and visit with our listeners and be cozy. And I got my steamed milk here, and I think I'm okay.
Wow, you sound set up. Have you managed to have some food this morning, or did you eat last night? Is that the last time?
No, I made the milk in lieu of eating food before we started because I didn't have time to prepare anything. But last night, Neil made us pizza. So if you need a task for your 8-year-old, well, I know you have a pizza maker as well. Well, there you go. Pizza.
Wow. And how was it? Was it good?
It was delicious. I broke my pizza pan, my stone.
Oh.
So, as you maybe know, last month.
I've done that before.
And, well, I forgot I was leaning on a cooler and I moved the cooler and pizza stone fell and shattered. So that was the end of that.
Oh, it shattered, did it? Because, I've broken mine in half and continued to use it by just pushing the two bits together.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. I mean, it is 3 pieces. I guess I probably could have done that. Okay. But I just said, farewell, friend. Oh. It lasted like 15 years. So that's pretty good. Probably would have lasted another many if I hadn't done that. But now that you have that Emil Henry, it's not a sponsorship. What do you call it? Like an affiliate?
Affiliate, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I wanted to browse their shop at some point, and I was like, well, if I'm going to buy it, I'm supposed to buy the podcast.
Yeah.
And they make good stuff. So
yeah, so if other people want to look at that, our new website, ancestralkitchenpodcast.com, there's a tab on there called resources, and that has a list of all the things that we use. And if you click through and decide to make a purchase, you'll be supporting the podcast with any of those.
It doesn't cost you extra.
There. No, it doesn't cost any extra. We just get a little bit back, which is always good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. But did you eat, Allison?
Yeah, we had lunch, and I've been trying to kind of swap between bone broth and meat stock recently. I think I mentioned on another episode, I've been drinking bone broth as my first drink every day, as well as using it in my cooking. And I wanted to kind of get really clear on bone broth and meat stock in my own equipment that I have, which is a slow cooker. And Italians have this routine, or a kind of a food tradition, where they get something meaty that someone else would think, oh, that's good for a meat stock. So there's bones in there, there's cartilage in there, and there's also meat on it. And they boil it. And then they use the broth, the stock, to cook tortellini in. So, the nonna will make tortellini, fill it with something, and then cook it in the broth. And that's the primi, the first course. And then they'll serve the meat off the bones and meat that went into the broth. They'll take the meat off the bone. They'll serve that with vegetables for second course. And so Flavio, my farmer, sells a particular, cut that is for that, called lesso. Lessare is to boil. And so I bought some lesso, and I put it in the stock pot this morning, which is so unusual for me. I'm used to, when I make a stock, cooking it for 24 hours, I put it in the night before because it's usually bone broth. But I put it in this morning and gave it just over 4 hours. And we had the beef kind of off the bones, picking off the bones, quite a lot of beef in there. And I had red rice with it, which was Italian, and mushrooms. I'm mental on mushrooms at the moment. I always love mushrooms, but I've been reading The Flavour Thesaurus by Nikki Segnit, and I'm on the mushrooms chapter. And I was so excited. I said to Rob last night, I want to just read the mushrooms chapter again because we finished it. Let's read the mushrooms again. And so I thought, okay, how can I cook these mushrooms? And I put them in the cast iron pan with lard, cooked them until there were lots of kind of the juices were there. And then I put some garlic in, and then I put thyme in. And I'm really excited about all the other ways I can cook mushrooms. And I was looking up mushrooms in all the other books that I've got to see how they're cooked. So yeah, we had beef, mushrooms, and I had red rice with it as well, and some sauerkraut. Really nice.
That sounds amazing. Amelia just posted a picture in the Discord the other day of mushrooms cooked in cream or something. Was that Amelia that posted that? I think it was.
Yeah, that's my recipe that she's testing, I think. Which is,
for the heart.
The Patreons get all the good stuff early.
Yeah.
And
they have to test everything. That's awesome. But it made me want mushrooms so badly that I had just put in an order for Azure same day that she posted that, and I went back and added 2 pounds of mushrooms to it.
Good plan. See, I got quite excited about mushrooms, and I know I've talked to you about growing mushrooms before, and I think I'd like to get someone on the podcast who grows their own mushrooms. So,
yes,
because
please.
It's easy, really, and then they can tell us how to do it.
I wonder if we should find someone. We live in the mushroom capital of the U.S., and I mean, this is like fungus central out here in the Northwest. You can just go for a stroll in the woods and you can just spot hundreds of things, and some you can pick and some you just look at. But there's probably somebody out here, right? I don't know. Anybody know anyone?
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah, no. If you're listening and you know someone who's an expert on mushrooms and who can teach us how to grow them at home, please do send me an email.
Yeah, maybe they'll tell us about the fun ones.
Yeah. Okay, let's read some reviews. We've got some wonderful reviews. Thank you to everyone who leaves us reviews. It buoys us up and helps people find us. So I've got one which is from JW2399, 5 stars, and it's titled My New Friends. And it says, Alison and Andrea are not only a wealth of information on ancestral eating, they are also 2 of the most genuine people I've ever listened to. This podcast is upbuilding and inspiring as well as practical. The Patreon community that is optional is culturally diverse, friendly, and supportive. I'm looking forward to years of supporting this community and the work Andrea and Alison are doing. Wow. Isn't that nice?
Fine. Thank you, JW.
Yeah, very kind. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for desiring to support us as we carry on. That's just so lovely to hear.
That is. I will read, excuse me, a review from Hayla Shaw.
Okay.
And it is titled Relatable and So Informational, 5 stars. And this person says, I love how Allison and Andrea have different approaches to eating ancestrally that make it available to people in any living situation. We have a small homestead, but I've learned so much from both of them, and I love their easy dialogue and down-to-earth approach. Hearing what they've actually eaten before each episode is fun, but also so helpful and approachable. I met Andrea at the Modern Homestead Conference, and she was so kind, and I can hear the kindness and fun throughout the podcast in both of them. Thank you, ladies. Wait, I met you? What? Who were you?
Yeah, no, you need to have a photo of the person so you can, oh yeah, that's who it was. It's the one I talked to.
The Modern Homestead Conference. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, Allison, because if anybody's in the area and you're thinking about going, I swear it was basically like if I went to a family reunion with a bunch of cousins that I didn't realize I had. That's how it felt. It was so awesome. Every single person you ran into was like amazing. I don't even know how to say.
That's what I imagine it would be like if we ever did an ancestral kitchen podcast kind of meetup.
That is how it felt. Because there's so many crossed over interests and passions that just all showed up at the same place.
Yeah, so, that's wonderful.
Do go if you're in the area and can get over there to Idaho.
Wonderful.
If you've been around ancestral food for 10 minutes, you know liver is a superfood. You're looking at a food packed with vitamins A, K, a broad spectrum of B vitamins, CoQ10, bioavailable iron, plus many essential minerals and more. Liver is your first stop when seeking to gain energy and restore your health. Not only is it a delicacy and staple of traditional diets, it's the first thing most animal predators go for when hunting. Are you looking for a good way to work liver into your daily life, but getting it on the table just isn't happening yet or as much as you'd like? This is where liver capsules come in. Allison and I are both supplementing our ancestral diets with liver capsules from One Earth Health. We get all the incredible benefits of liver, even when we're on the road or preparing non-liver meals for our family, and the sourcing and preparation has all been handled for us. One Earth Health produces nutritious organ capsules from 100% grass-fed New Zealand-raised cattle. Support the pod by purchasing through our link, and you'll also get 5% off and free shipping as a bonus. Go to oneearthhealth.com/ancestralkitchen or check the show notes.
Okay, so I'm going to read an example question that's fired up today's episode because we've had lots of questions from listeners, patrons, and people on our social media over the years about this topic. And Andrea has graciously just let us know that she can share her knowledge. So we are talking about chicken butchering at home today. And one of the questions that we received is, I have a few garden chickens and I want to have a go at butchering them myself, but I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I have the right tools or the right setup. Please, can you share your experience and tips so I can feel confident enough to give it a go? Now, Andrea, I know that you have a lot of experience with butchering chickens at home on the farm, and you have talked about a little bit about the tools that you use in Meals at the Ancestral Hearth, our first cookbook. I remember you listed them all in there. But in this episode, we're hoping that you can go much deeper and explain to us the hows, the whys, and just guide someone who wants to have a go at it through it in a way that will make them feel confident at the end.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with, if you're on the Discord, do check out the butchery thread. I mean, it's not just me posting butchery stuff in there. Nicole posted in there. Nick is posted in there. There's stuff in there about butchering animals, posting pictures and ideas. But let's start with why you would want to butcher your own chickens.
Okay.
First of all, contrary to what I'm saying, but I will say you don't have to. If you just cannot stomach it, there's no law that says you have to butcher them. So if there's a great farm around you that can do it, don't feel bad about outsourcing the process to them. But if you keep a home flock of layers, it's a really good husbandry skill for managing birds to be able to also dispatch them. And I think from the stewardship perspective, if you know how to dispatch a chicken, you should also know how to get it into your pot. We don't, if we have a sickly bird and that's why it's being dispatched, which is very rare. I think we've only had 2 over the span of hundreds of birds. We don't eat that. It just doesn't seem right. But sometimes you have old layers. This will happen as your flock grows and matures. And maybe you want to keep them as pets, but or the roosters, but it is more economical to put them in your pot.
Yeah.
We also get a lot of free birds from flocksters who need to cull their hens and their roosters, but they don't want to butcher themselves. And I know a woman out here who is known, she's a reputation among all the farms for, if you don't want a bird, just bring it to me and she'll butcher and eat it. And that's how she feeds herself.
Wow.
So she fills her freezer
Clever.
for free. Very clever. People who are trying to offload roosters and things are often really desperate because there's no established way to do it. You just need to know someone with a farm. So we get tons of roosters from people and we typically just butcher them. Also, if you want to raise your own meat birds, which isn't really the main thrust of this episode, but everything I say here does apply to meat birds as well. It's nice to start small and work your way up. So if you practice, we kind of practiced on a hen here and there, roosters here and there, and then eventually we had 50 and then 100 and then 300 meat birds to do. So we worked our way up.
Right.
And if you're learning on your own, we didn't have somebody to teach us. We were just doing it, with, I'll explain how we did it, but with YouTube and books, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And it is really nice if you can get with somebody, put your hands on a bird with someone. But if you can't, then don't start with 50 birds and never having eviscerated before. Start with like 1 hen and go from there.
Okay. Before we kind of dive into tools and techniques, I want to ask the deep question, which is how do you and how do the rest of your family feel about the emotional aspect of butchering, the actual killing of animals that you've had around you and, have been part of your life? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Okay. I will say that it is different for each person, both in my family and outside. We are largely in our society raised only with a familiarity of animals as companion animals. So animals for purpose is, although the majority of the population in the US, I will say, since I can't necessarily speak to the European countries, but I think it's the same there. The majority does eat animal and animal products. However, their personal experience with animals tends to only be companions. So the paradigm of an animal whose sole purpose is to live a good life and then die for you and go to your table, while we are aware of it in the abstract, it is less common to encounter. So you're stepping back into your ancestral shoes by taking on the role of the master and the butcher and the steward of an animal. Meredith Lee, we interviewed her in episode 77.
Yeah.
She came back to us after we did that episode and added a Patreon bonus just out of the blue, which was amazing. She wrote an ebook which talks about her personal experience moving from a very dedicated plant-based eater to what we all know her as now, which is a very accomplished butcher. And so if you do have complex feelings, that might be a place to look. Also, I would say to be comfortable with even eating animal meat, but also butchering does take, I think, to be very conscious and comfortable with it, a measure of acceptance and peace with your own death. And that could be another day where we could go deeper down that rabbit hole. But
I think, we've talked about, we've hinted about that on several podcasts, and
we probably should actually do that.
Accepting death as a ritual of life, and as how this world works, is something that our society doesn't encourage us to do. It encourages us to push it away.
No, it really does. You're right.
About it, and really spending some time contemplating that, I think, helps in all levels, not just, whether you're going to butcher birds or whether you're going to eat animals, or how you're going to feel about your own death and the death of the people you love. So it's a deep topic, and one that we're not really encouraged to think about. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And once you go into the ancestral world, it starts with, I want to make sourdough bread, and it ends with, when my parents pass, I want them to be in my home. It's a full encompassing, it's every aspect of life that comes into the thread of the ancestral living. So I would also say having a ritual or a prayer can be helpful. I know farmers have said, some have said, they have like a cow CSA share, and they send out a letter to the customers the night before and ask them all to pray, because maybe the cow will be butchered the next morning. And that's a cool way to involve people in the husbandry aspect of taking care of your animals and butchering. I think that's a good step. We typically, the kids come out and everybody kind of can pet the animal and say thank you to the animal. And there does, I don't know, Allison, I think I told you once, Gabriel would love to read the book White Fang. It'd be a really good read aloud. It's about, animals living up in the Yukon. And we're listening to that book again. I've already read it a couple months ago, and now we're listening to it, and the kids are just riveted. And it does, I like the way he talks about, the animals in their cycle and what's expected of them. That's Jack London, for anybody trying to look it up. It does get easier, I think. And then in the beginning, it might be hard, you're spending a lot of time with the hen, then you butcher her, and then after a while, you're like, oh, we have 100 to do. How early can we start? So we never go into it with a cavalier attitude, but it doesn't jerk your heartstrings quite as much after you've done quite a lot. Although there always will be that animal that you had a really good relationship with. But also when you're spending a ton of money on the birds, feeding 100 layers or feeding 100 meat birds or whatever, it's a lot. It's kind of a relief to see the date on the calendar and say, okay, they're going soon. And in homesteaders world, it's sometimes called freezer camp. So they'll say, oh yes, they're going to freezer camp in March, So yeah. Does that help?
You mentioned when you were talking about, the process, and you said the kids come out and, they'll pet the animal. Talk a little bit about whether you think that children can be involved in that process.
Yeah. We find it appropriate for our children to be involved, and they've all been involved from a very young age. So I don't think it was too much of a shock for them. The first chickens that I ever killed myself were on a farm, and Jacob was tied to my back, and he was just, a few months old. But not every kid may be ready to be involved, and I don't think that they should be pushed if they don't want to be.
All right.
I do think it's good to explain it before, maybe the old blue hen is going to be butchered and they really don't want to be a part of it. But make sure that they understand when you come home, it's the butcher it will be done and this is what will have happened. I think that's okay to explain. Kind of maybe depends on the child's temperament and the age that they come into it. I think the process and the way you explain it and treat the animals is very important because your children are watching you.
Yeah.
I think it's important anyways, but I think that's one of the sides of it. The respect and gentleness and kindness you show to the animals is an attitude that they will pick up. I know adults who grew up on farms butchering from a very young age, and the experience with their parents was very cavalier, very careless or thoughtless, even cruel towards animals. And those adults to this day have issues being around butchery. So you don't want to create a problem. We have had to butcher some loved and named animals that the kids didn't want to butcher. And that is the reality of farming, is that you cannot keep every animal that comes through as a pet. So year over year of owning animals, it has gotten easier as we make sure to frame the animal's lifespan from the very beginning and the purpose, literally from the acquisition of the animal. So, this Angus is born. This is what he's for. He's going to live a good life, isn't he? We're going to take care of him. We're going to pet him and we're going to love him and make sure that he's as happy as he can be. And his day will be around this time. And he knows his purpose in this world, and God has intended him for our food, and we're very thankful for that. And so that kind of conversation just kind of flows constantly with the kids.
And setting the expectation. I think that I've seen how important that is in Gable with other things, to explain what the role is, to explain how our life cycle and the process works. And then there's no kind of, what's happening, suddenly, to be as open as possible. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get down to some detail. So imagine I have a hen, perhaps, who's too old to lay much, or I've got a few roosters that have grown up from my batch of chicks, or maybe I'm planning to raise a flock of meat birds and I want to do the butchering at home. So let's talk about the process and the tools. First of all, what happens? What are the distinct parts of butchering a chicken? What actually happens?
Perfect. Okay, yeah. So I'll tell you what happens when you butcher a chicken, and then you can ask me tools if you want. I want to explain the tools during the butchering process. Okay, so first you need to kill it. So you got to capture it. So if you planned to butcher the bird, you may have kept them off of feed for 24 hours. I promise this helps so much during the butchering process. And if you at all can, please do. A full crop is much harder to pull out, and it's very messy.
Oh, yeah.
I've done it both ways. It's not always, sometimes you're like, this is a problem. We need to butcher this right now. And there's no planning. And then sometimes you say, you know what? Can you take that bird off feed tonight? Put him in a separate pen. Depends on the situation. So you've captured your bird. You have her under your arm, and you can invert her in a cone, which is the easiest method. And Allison, I'll give a few options for cones later. You can make them out of all kinds of things. Or you can just hold the bird, I'm going to describe it, like between your knees with its head at your knees as you kind of kneel on the ground. And we've done a lot of birds that way. I much prefer the cone method, if at all possible, but sometimes you don't have time to set up a cone situation. So but the cone does save you time because you don't have to sit there while the bird bleeds out. But it is a very hands-on approach because I remember reading a book back in the early days about soldiering and PTSD and things, and they said, people who maybe dropped a bomb by remote control had a different experience of killing versus people who, let's say, had to stab someone who was right in front of them, just to be brutal in my description. And that's the proximity factor. So butchering a bird between your knees, they're much more it's much more intimate. We'll say it that way.
Yeah.
So if you find that method harder, you may or may not, but it certainly is more tedious because you have to sit there the whole time. So you'll cut the jugular on both sides of the jaw, and I'll explain where you can learn how to do this correctly. But we sever both sides to get both of those blood vessels, but we do not cut all the way across because that cuts the windpipe. That actually causes stress for the animal. They suck up blood. There's a bigger mess. It's just not as pleasant to do it that way. So we just choose to cut the jugular on both sides. There's other ways to kill chickens, and they're good too, but this is just the one we use. And it's probably the easiest, I would say. And the birds can fully drain all their blood hanging in the cone. So that's better for the quality and the keeping of the meat. So now that the bird is dead, excuse me, you need to take the feathers off. So you'll take your fully dead and bled out bird and you're going to scald it. So Allison, you've probably blanched green beans before, or tomatoes maybe to take the peels off. It's the same thing. So you're basically, you can call it scalding, you can call it blanching, whatever you want to say. You're going to plunge that bird into hot water. The temperature is very important. 145 Fahrenheit. What is that? Like 68.5 or something. I don't know my Celsius very well. But 145 Fahrenheit. Gary actually uses 146. He's found that even a 1 or 2 degree difference can be critical for different breeds and for getting the absolutely perfect pluck. But just go with 145 or 146.
Okay.
If you're doing 100 birds in a row, then you can fine tune it over the process of learning that breed. And you want to kind of plunge the bird up and down to get the water fully under all the feathers. So you do want a big enough pot because we do it outside. I've done it on the kitchen stove before. That's fine too.
And you're just doing that with your hands, so you're holding the chicken.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. You can put your hand in 146 degrees water. I mean, you don't want to sit it in there, but you can stick it in. It's not too hot. If it is so hot that you can't touch the water, it's too hot and you're going to cook your bird. I
see. Right.
Yeah. And you can add a few drops of soap. We use Thieves dish soap, obviously, because it's edible. I probably wouldn't say use like a blue or green dyed soap to do this, but you could put a few drops of dish soap in the water to break that surface tension. So if you put the bird in for too long or too hot, you're going to cook the skin. And not only does it kind of get this unsightly peely look, but it will also start to tear when you pluck the feathers out. And that's not harmful. If you do that, you don't have to throw the bird away. It's like, oh, well, this doesn't look so good. Moving on with my life. It's just unattractive. And once you scald your bird, you can pluck it either by pulling out handfuls of feathers, which is very easy. And that's how people have done it for basically as long as people have been eating birds. Or you can put a few scalded birds in a mechanical plucker and just follow the manufacturer's instructions. You need to do 2 or 3 birds at a time for most pluckers. A mechanical plucker, to describe it visually, is like the tub of an upright washing machine with the holes in the side, except in the holes on the side and bottom, there are rubber fingers stuck through, and these grip and pull out the feathers while the machine spins. Constantly running like a hose over it keeps the feathers washing down and away while it spins. And you really only need to use a plucker if you're doing a lot of birds. I mean, we've done batches of 50 birds by hand.
Right.
It speeds things up, but if you're thinking, I don't want to spend, it can be pretty expensive. Don't feel like you have to have it.
So how long would it take you to pluck 50 birds?
I have no idea. I don't know because it comes through the way we butcher with just often, most of the time, you could ask Gary, it's just Gary because everything else has to keep going too. The kids have to keep going. The farm has to keep going.
Food has to keep,
Food has to keep going. So often it's just Gary on his own. And then if I'm out there helping him, we're doing the whole process over and over from beginning to end. So I don't know how to say the timing on the plucking.
I see.
It only
It's all
takes a
going at
couple
the
minutes.
same time.
Yeah, it takes a couple
Okay.
minutes. But the reason why pluckers are even a thing out here is because of a really great manufacturer that we'll talk about later, who was seeing the rise of people raising their own meat birds, and not just wonderful farms like Polyface and stuff also that we can buy birds from if you're local to them. But they just saw the rise of homesteaders wanting to do it at home, and so their mission was to make really good equipment that was accessible to homesteaders without spending, tens of thousands of dollars. But getting good equipment still can run you into the several thousands of dollars. So if you're just doing a couple birds, don't worry about it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right. So she's been butchered, she's been bled, she's been plucked. So now you have this whole bird. They hit your table, heads, feet, and all, with no feathers. Time to remove the head and feet. All right. I'm going to say, watch as many YouTube videos as you can very carefully to know how to do this right. I could spend a lot of time here explaining how Gary does this, and he has figured out some techniques that work really well for him. And Allison, I think it would be great if he could make a video for the patrons with our next. We have a bunch of roosters that need to go, so
that would be
the next time he does it, then we could post that in the treasure trove sometime. But I think you need to see it, even if it's not in person. YouTube is, you can learn how to build a house on YouTube. So you can learn how to put a bird in the pot on YouTube.
I'll file that for future reference when I want to build my house.
Yeah, exactly. There is someone who did that actually. But I will say, you will never poke or stab a bird with your knife, and you will only ever slice. Once you stab a bird or point a knife into it in any way, you run the risk of opening up the entrails inside, which is just a mess. So you're going to remove the head, which you can cut off with a pair of sharp kitchen shears or with a knife. It's not that hard. You're going to remove the feet, which there's a knuckle that you slice very carefully, and you'll see that if you watch videos, and you could just pop it off very easily. Then you're going to take off the neck. Again, you want to refer to the videos or the book that I'm going to mention, the windpipe and the esophagus. So Harvey Ussery, and I hope I'm saying his name right, has a book called The Small Scale Poultry Flock.
So I've heard you talking about that one a lot.
Yeah. And we're actually talking about it in the Patreon the other day too. I think it's the only book you need as far as you want to get started having a flock. He really covers a lot, ranging from creating an environment that's healthy for your chickens to scoring your birds on an Excel spreadsheet to see how valuable they are. And he also explains butchery. So on page 300, he has a good explanation of the process of removing the neck, the crop, and the windpipe, and the esophagus, which is all very straightforward. You just need to see it with your eyes. Nothing beats doing it yourself. After you take that off, now you have what kind of looks like a bird you would see at the store, except if you notice that it's still got all its insides inside and it's closed up at the bottom. So you're going to cut a slit under the back of the base of the breastbone, on the belly, not the back, sorry. And then you can reach inside and loosen all the organs and pull them out. This is where breed matters. When we started our butchering process with, old roosters and old layers and things, and I will say those are harder to do because their feathers are more mature, their ligaments are stronger, they're smaller body cavities typically, especially if they're production layers. They'll have eggs inside, which we'll get to that in a minute. They are a little bit harder to do, And we said, man, look at all these videos of people butchering birds. They're so fast. We could barely get our hand in there. We can, and then we butchered meat birds and we're like, oh, I see. These are a lot easier. So if you find that it takes you 2.5 hours to butcher a hen, don't think that butchering your 30 meat birds is going to take, a month. It won't. It's just the process. Joel does the evisceration of a bird in 30 seconds. I've watched him do it. His son, Daniel, I think, is just as fast as him. They were both doing it when I watched him. But that's the practice of thousands of birds.
Yeah, exactly.
And he says, you put your hand in there and you immediately, every, square inch of your hand knows what it's touching because you've done this 1,000 times. Once you pull out kind of this big blob of organs, then you can stop and sort out the organs, or you can have somebody next to you at the table do that while you start working on the next bird, depending on how many you have. If you're a home education family, which doesn't necessarily mean a homeschool family. I know lots of people, Allison, you guys included, whose kids get a lot of education, with other kids, but you're a home education family.
Yeah.
Then this is where you're all oohing and awing over these beautiful entrails, and you can look and say, well, what's this? And how long are these intestines,
This is how long intestines are. Wow.
That's a very fun part.
How do you feel about our food world? Do you want to see change like we do? If so, head over to patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast and help support us to get this work out as far and wide as we can. To say thank you, we've got a host of extra ancestral food material to share with you. You can connect with us more deeply via our Patreon exclusive podcasts, our after show chats, our dedicated forum, and our ancestral food get-togethers. And there's a library of downloads that will support you in your own kitchen. By joining, you'll be really helping us to continue making this podcast and to focus on having a bigger impact, reaching more people, making a greater difference. So we can move together towards the future food world we all want to see. We've got 4 levels of support to suit different pockets. Check out www.patreon.com/Ancestral Kitchen Podcast for all the details.
So when you sort the organs, this is a bird you raised on quality feed and grass and bugs and things. And the bird has passed on to my children are always like, can't wait to see that bird in heaven one day. The bird is passed on to somewhere else, and you might as well use everything that she's left here on earth for you. So you've got the heart, the liver, and the gizzard. Those are definitely primaries.
Yeah.
The gizzard needs to be cleaned because it'll be full of rocks and food that she was grinding.
Okay.
Again, you can watch videos. That was my job with the last ones, Allison. I just sat with a giant basin of gizzards and cleaned them. But you just
Someone's got to do it.
yeah, it looks just like a clamshell. And if you imagine where a clamshell opens, you just kind of cut that with your knife. And then when you open it, instead of a clam and a pearl inside, it's food and rocks inside. It's a farm clam, I guess we'll call it that.
Yeah.
And there's a thick membrane that lines the gizzard. And after you've done a lot, then you find that you can just pull that whole thing out with all the rocks and everything in it very neatly and discard it and then rinse off the gizzard. In the beginning, you just kind of make a mess out of everything, which is fine. Removing the gizzard and the liver, cutting them off of the entire, all the organs come out connected. It's not like a heart falls out and a liver falls out.
Yeah.
Like they're all, tied to each other, obviously. So you need to cut them all apart. And you need to do this very carefully because there is a dark green bile sac. And if that bursts all over the organs, it's kind of like, well, all right, looks like the dogs get this one.
Yeah.
You'll do that at some point. And that's just part of learning evisceration. You good, Allison?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Yeah.
Right. Okay, just making sure it's okay. All right, so then you're gonna, you've taken these organs out. And when you watch the video, remember that the organs pass from the neck. So you're actually going to pull the windpipe down through the kind of hole you've made, which you'll see that quite easily on thousands of videos online. And then remember that food goes in the top of the chicken and it comes out the bottom. So the food is connected at both, or the portal is connected at both ends.
Yeah.
So it's just a simple case of cutting it out. And again, it would be really hard to explain it on audio, but you can watch a video and see it quite simply happen in front of you. Now you have a bird with no insides. I think I forgot to say the lungs. The lungs are, well, Gary usually does this at the very end, but the lungs of a chicken are very much kind of matted up to the ribs. So sometimes they pull out in one piece that you can then, of course, show your kids how you can blow them up, put air back in them. But usually they kind of come apart a little bit and some lung stays in. We don't really try to take all that out. We leave it inside. It just is in the bird when we roast it. And we also leave in the kidneys. The kidneys are also kind of nestled into the frame of the bird. Okay, so you now need to take off the oil gland. You can just cut off the entire tail of the bird, or you can just slice out the oil gland. So birds, if you've ever picture in your mind Allison a duck preening, and you see her run her beak over her tail and then over her wings, what she's actually doing is getting oil from a gland and then spreading it across her wings to keep herself dry. So birds have an oil gland.
I see.
Right on the, not quite the tip of their tail, and it's bitter, so you want to take it out. I mean, you're not going to die if you don't take it out, but it is bitter. So you can find pictures and videos on YouTube so easily for seeing that. Just say, how do I cut off the oil gland of a chicken? And takes about 2 seconds. So other things we've saved the testes of roosters, and I fried them up with hearts. Me and Jeremy and Hannah ate them.
Yep. They're good.
Yeah, they're actually delicious.
I heard they are. Yeah.
Not gonna lie. They were amazing. And that's where I had this idea of, hey, we could sell frozen packages of hearts and testes for Valentine's Day. If you're butchering layers, you probably won't see this with meat chickens. Probably won't even see much in the way of testes on meat chickens either, but they are there. But if you're butchering layers, they'll have eggs inside, ranging from tiny clusters of yolk, and you can follow the egg formation process all the way down to, they might even have an egg in the shell or in a partially formed shell if she hasn't laid yet. This is super fascinating for the kids. So they can see, you can Google, life cycle of an egg, but I mean, you can see the whole thing. It's all attached in one kind of long string, and you can see it laid out on the table in front of you. You can use those yolks and eggs. They're perfectly good. You can just throw them in your custard or ice cream. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's really helpful, because I'm kind of imagining the process now. And obviously, videos are where you go to get the specific details, but that's really lays it out for me. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So can we talk about tools now? Have you done with that process? Okay. So I know you've got specific tools that you really like, and you've talked about them on Discord quite a lot. Explain to listeners what they will need. If they're considering their first butchering, what are the things that they definitely need in their toolkit before they start?
Okay. You don't need much if you're just going to do a hen. I'll just preface this by saying that. The first thing is, it's really helpful to watch as many videos as you can of people butchering. I don't even know how many videos we watched, Allison. I think when Gary and I sit and eat lunch, we're watching people butcher. That's what we do. Different people show different angles of the butchering process, or they use different tools, or they have a different sized bird. I mean, I don't
yeah, you want to see people doing all different things. They work at varying speeds. If you've ever learned how to knit or crochet and you watch a YouTube video and they're like, okay, so you put the yarn here. You're like, I'm following. And they're like, you just tie a double half hitch, triple plum knot, and then you just like loop it over here and then throw it back over your head.
Right,
and then
thanks for that.
And you're like, I'll miss something there. So watching lots of videos, people will emphasize different aspects that are helpful for you. The book I recommend the most, like I said, usually, Allison, I come into everything with a 10-mile long book list, but I'm just going to give you one. And that is The Small Scale Poultry Flock by Harvey User.
So is that in our bookstore? Have we put it in the bookstore?
Yeah, I think it is actually.
Yeah. Okay. So in the show notes,
the publisher, Chelsea Green. You know, we love Chelsea Green.
Wonderful publisher.
And
yes.
Who was working there at the time? I think was it Meredith that was working there at the time? I think she is the one who sent this to me. She just thought I would like it, and I love it. So it's a vibrant living book written by a man who is deeply passionate about both his birds and all fowl and the natural processes of nature and letting nature work to its advantage without harming it. He also is really passionate about sharing and teaching all of that with others. If anybody's seen Melissa Norris and Carolyn and Josh from the homesteading family, drawing a blank on their name, they have a school of traditional skills, and Harvey has come in and done workshops for them in there.
Okay.
So I recommend this as the number one book for anyone who wants to keep chickens in any capacity. It is gorgeous. It's colorful. It's full of brilliant pictures. My kids just sit and read it. If you do like a morning time read aloud with your kids, this makes a fascinating read aloud, which I know one of our Canadian listeners who has a bunch of boys told me that she was reading it out loud to her kids. But his chapter 28 is all on butchering poultry, including he does emphasize why you should learn how to do this. And he has step-by-step photos. So if you just don't have YouTube, I mean, you could figure it out with his book.
Okay, wonderful. What I wanted to say was there's a link in the show notes to our bookstore.
Yes.
Maybe new listeners don't know yet that we have a kind of a storefront that's not Amazon. That is a company that has a virtual bookstore, but also supports local bookstores with some of its profits. So go check out the show notes, and then you can find that book in there, along with lots and lots of other books that we absolutely love. Yeah. And you'll find it probably very difficult not to buy them all.
Yeah. We've heard some patrons say, oh, great. Now my book list just tripled.
Yeah.
I didn't know there'd be so many on here.
Okay, that was my aside. Yeah. You can carry on now.
You could also sign up for memberships or classes like Farmstead Meatsmith or Abundance Plus. I know they teach on there. We've never done that, but you could if you wanted to. But there's also a lot. You know, if you spend $30 on a really good book and then watch a bunch of videos for free, that's good too.
Yeah.
Okay. So that being said, first of all, say for simple butchering, you just have one hen. Maybe you have a flock of 10 chickens and you have one hen. Really, all you need is a very good sharp knife. Like you can shave the hair off your arm with it. Sharp knife, a pot of water, and a stove. That's really all you need. And the pot and the stove is for scalding the bird. So I guess you could always skin it and not scald it if you didn't want to. But obviously we love chicken skin. So I've done this entire process on the kitchen counter in a tiny apartment with a baby crawling around by my feet. You know, you don't need to have, 300 square foot space with tools. But it does make it nice. So everything that I described in the process above for that bird, except for when I said that you put it in the machine to pluck it, that's the only tools you needed there.
Okay.
And Allison, I put the links. So Garrett, we have these favorite knives, and as we've watched butchering videos, it's kind of like Where's Waldo? Now we're like, oh look, they have the same knives. So like they pop up all the time. So the links for those knives, I know I put that in the cookbook. So probably, obviously, everyone listening bought our cookbook.
Because, of course.
If you haven't yet, go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/shop.
Very smooth, Allison. We should put that in the show notes, though, for real. I did put the links to those knives in there, and sorry, they are on Amazon. But it's really surprising how few tools you actually need to do.
But what if you're doing lots and lots and lots of birds? You're obviously going to need more tools then. Gary must have a lot more tools.
Yeah, he does. But we acquired them over time. So every year that we did butchering, we added a few more things. And then we increased the birds. And then we added a few more things and increased the birds. So I'm going to, all right, Allison, I'm going to list them.
Okay.
They're more detailed listed. They're kind of detailed listed in the cookbook. And then I will type this list out and post it in the treasure trove or something. So if the patrons want to or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
How's that sound? Okay.
Yeah,
so for full on butchering, you've butchered a couple hens. You're like, this is not so bad. Now you have a plan to do 50 or 100 or 200 birds every year with your neighbors, your parents, whoever wants to cash in on this great opportunity. Okay. The things you need: cages for transporting chickens from the field to the butcher site, cones for bleeding the birds, bungees to restrain the birds' feet in the cones, sharp replaceable razor knives, the kind you could just pop out. We keep one by the cones where Gary does the cut, and you will need to change your knife over the course of 50 birds. A sharp knife is kinder to the animal. A large scalding pot and a scalding burner. If you're doing a lot, please do this outside. A plucker, a hose. I guess the plucker might be a person or your kids, but a hose to run water through the plucker. I think we have 3 hoses set up at the site where we butcher. I'm trying to remember what Gary does. And then because we don't really have water pressure per se, he's actually attached a pump to the hose so that he can get pressure. Folding tables or stainless steel tables really helps. If you had a 3-bay sink, which we don't, but we are always looking for one online, that would help too. But we've managed without it so far. A hanging hose. Gary has found that, excuse me, we put up a canopy and now we have a carport to work under because it's always raining out here. And he doesn't have the hose just flopped across the table. He has it tied with a hose clamp to the beams of the canopy or the
that's really clever.
Yeah, so it hangs down, and that way he doesn't have to run the risk of it falling because he sanitizes everything, including he runs sanitizing water through the hoses before we start.
But talk about the sanitizing, because this surprised me the first time you told me.
We just use tons and tons and tons of water and thieves spray. So we make a big pump. Actually, he makes like a bucket basically with the thieves cleaner, which we get from Young Living. I think everybody knows. And he puts it in. You can get, I think they're made for like spraying pesticides, but you can get these continuous sprayers at Lowe's or whatever. Exactly. And so he sprays, everything is soaked, scrubbed, laid out. He lays everything out. And then once we start, then every couple birds or as the spirit moves them, he sprays everything down in between. And then he's constantly running water over the entire surface. Like if you walk up to where Gary's working on a bird at any point in time, everything looks really clean. And this is important because we don't use bleach. We don't use any harsh every drop of water that runs off of here, our dogs could lick up and drink. Our chickens could be picking up off the floor and drinking if they wanted to. And it does all run down through our drainage system, ultimately into our own creek, into our own pond, where our own animals are. So this is important to us for many reasons. Joel Salatin made a comment when I was watching him butchering, and he was hosing the surface down. And I didn't even notice that he was doing it because it's just how I'm used to watching Gary do it. And then Joel said, I've been to so many homesteads and I've seen so many butchering processes that are just filthy and messy because there's just a mess everywhere and they're not cleaning it in between. And he said, we don't use bleach. We don't use any harsh cleaners. And I thought, oh, really? And he said, it's just important, with just water, you can constantly be cleaning the surface. And that made me feel good. I was like, oh, look at us.
Excellent. I do it the same way Joel
Yes.
does.
So
Okay.
that's a good thing to know. And
let's go back to, we should go back to your list when you finish that. I was thinking, listeners, I have seen the length of this list. So I want to hear what the other recommendation is. Yeah.
Cleaning is an important thing. I don't think I spent much time explaining that, but you can do it with just your hose and your water. So now we know. Yeah. Let's see. We said hoses. Let me think. Okay. A sharpening steel for your knives. This is not a whetstone. It's and it's not rough. It's very smooth. It's just for repolishing your knife, basically, during the course of butchering. And you probably can imagine that iconic image of a butcher standing at his table, kind of like shearing his knives together, clanging his knives on something. That's what he's doing. He's just polishing the surface to keep it from dulling while he works very quickly. But if you were going to stop and sharpen it on a whetstone, you'd have to stop and clean the knife and dry it. Yeah. You need sharp knives. Knives that hold their sharpness for a minute is helpful. And again, that's all linked in the cookbook. Rubber or leather aprons, very helpful. We didn't have those until last year. We were just soaked all the time before. But Gary's mom made me one, and I bought Gary one. So now we have two. Boots, helpful. Buckets lined with compostable bags for blood that goes under the cones. And you can use the blood to feed your soldier flies or worms, the blood, or you can compost it. And guess what? Harvey Ussery talks all about that in his book. The blood is really sticky and coagulant, as you know, Allison. It's hard to get out of the bucket without a bag.
I see. Yeah.
So if you can line it, that's good. And our bags, we can put our entire bag right into our compost heap and they just break down. Brilliant. Gary also keeps a 5-gallon bucket with a bag in it for the unwanted innards at the dressing table, bile sack, things like that.
Yeah.
Plastic bussing tubs. You never have too many and you rarely have enough. So get as many as you can. Nick said that. Do you remember, Allison? He said, lessons I've learned. More tubs, more bins. I agree. You want also large tubs or coolers or troughs of ice to set these bussing tubs in if you're going to be chilling your organs. So we actually don't drop our organs right into ice. We have the small tubs, and we've used metal bowls before and whatever we had on hand. And we set them kind of nestled into ice in these huge plastic totes that we use for every butchering. And Gary's actually at this point now built a big wooden frame that they all sit on. And this next round, he's plugging drains into them so he can drain them and reload the ice more easily. Also, you want additional ice and additional tub or trough to plunge your dressed, that means plucked and gutted bird, into, because you want to chill it. Disposable gloves for working, heaters for the workspace if it's cold, a cover if it's rainy, pressure washer, clean the pavement afterwards. That's helpful. Cutting boards, vacuum sealer and vacuum seal bags, labels for packaging, or poultry shrink bags. Don't love those, but we used those for a couple of years before we got a vacuum sealer. Racks for drip drying chickens. Very helpful. You're doing a lot of birds. Gary built one out of PVC pipe. You can build it out of found materials, old oven racks, whatever. It is really helpful to be able to stand the birds on end, though. Paper towels.
So is that after you? Hang on, sorry. Is that after you've scalded them?
No, this is actually after they iced.
I see. Okay.
I'll run through that very briefly when we get to the packaging part. But you do want to chill the bird once you've butchered a bird. She's very warm. She's body temperature, right?
Yeah.
She was just walking around picking up bugs a minute ago. So she's very warm, and you want to drop that meat straight into ice. And it is ancestral tradition and you'll run across it all the time. You typically don't eat or cook warm meat. Okay, it does happen, obviously, but lots of times people want it cooled down first. And this is because of the process of rigor mortis and things.
Yeah.
So, paper towels for cleanup. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of clean water.
Yeah.
So for us, that means we run the well pump multiple times during the process. A compost pile for feathers and innards, whatever your dogs and pigs don't want to eat. And not to be ignored. I was very happy that Nick said I think he said he did this, and he was really happy that he did this because I think this is one of the most important tools for butchering a freezer meal that can be baking while you're outside doing this. Because you will be hungry.
Need some food.
Believe it or not, after plucking apart bile sacks, you will be hungry.
Yeah.
So there's your tools, Allison.
Wonderful. Okay. So, I think, it's useful to have both those lists because, if you're starting off with just 1 or 2 birds, then I know that really I don't need much.
No.
But if I'm wanting to then expand, like you said, piece by piece, it's just like in anything in the kitchen. When I started making sourdough, I just had kind of 1 bowl and 1 baking tin. And piece by piece, I've put together over time, when budget has allowed, the tools and equipment that's made it much easier for me to make lots of sourdough bread and make it easier for me. So that's really useful. Thank you.
Hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Allison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Allison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Allison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye.
Okay, where do we go next?
Let me run through some options for cones real quick, because that can be the most expensive part of average home butchering, and then chilling.
Okay, great.
So on cones, I will say, I really do love having cones. You can get actual metal purpose-made cones. That's all they're made for. They come in different sizes, turkey size, chicken size, bantam.
Right.
You can buy these online from He Who Shall Not Be Named, or you can go to feathermanequipment.com. There's a variety of other brands, but I'm mostly familiar with Featherman. For U.S. farmers, I do recommend Featherman. They make all their equipment in the U.S., and you will find with chicken butchering equipment, often equipment that comes from overseas has a very low quality rating, doesn't last as long. Gary built they were the original ones that I said were selling. It kind of brought pluckers to the consciousness of the home farmer. And they originally, the guy had drawn up a design, and then he would sell, you could buy the plan and some of the really unique parts. And then he basically just gave you a list and sent you to the hardware store to buy all the rest of the parts. And he called it Whiz Bang Plucker. Yeah.
Ooh, nice. You know what? I just wanted to say that Zero Shoes, that
yes,
the kind of no heel flat shoe company that has like soles that are 2 millimeters thick. When they first started, they literally just sold you the rubber, a little thing that you could measure your foot and draw around it, a puncher to punch a hole for the lace, and the lace. And Rob was the first person to import that from the States to Italy. And literally we used to cut our shoes out of rubber, make a hole in them, get a lace and tie it through them. And now Zero Shoes sell tons and tons of different options for, running, walking, kids, adult, whatever. But just like that, a company making available plans for a plucker and giving you instructions on what tools you'll need and how to do it. I just think that's just wonderful, really, really empowering and a great way to get people doing it.
Yeah, I do too. And originally in the beginning, that, the only people who were doing this were really keen on, doing it. And kind of like with the shoes, it wasn't that familiar to people. Now, if we talk about like a zero rise shoe, pretty much everybody knows what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
So the customer base has widened over time.
Exactly.
So they sell a really, really good plucker. We don't have their plucker now. They're the one that they sell now.
Right.
But Gary built this one back in 2009 for a friend of mine. But we want to get their plucker because, we just want to have the one that's going to last forever.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
For cones, you can also use a 1 gallon jug. If anybody's familiar with those tall gallons that you get from Azure Standard, those work really well. You can cut the bottom out of that and then cut the neck wide enough for a hen or duck's head to go through, and you can nail it to a tree or a fence post or something. Same thing you could do with a traffic cone. Even if you buy a traffic cone brand new, they've kind of gone up in price now. They're like $20. But that's still cheaper than some of the metal cones can be $60 or more a piece.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's why people are coming up with other cone methods.
Yeah.
So you can cut a hole in the top to get it a little wider to allow the bird's head to pass through and flip it upside down and then nail it to a tree or a post. What we did for hundreds of birds was a 5 gallon bucket where Gary cut the bottom out and he cut a slit down the side. So now you have kind of this piece of plastic that he just sort of twisted into a cone shape. And then I actually don't know how he closed the cone. Now I'm trying to picture the fastening that he used, but he saw it on YouTube. Some, industrious homesteader doing it, and then nail it to a tree or a post. So we did that. Now we have metal cones. We finally acquired some.
You've done enough of it that I think you deserve.
We've done all the other things though. For chilling the bird, this is something that I feel like I never really heard about or knew about before, but you want to chill the meat to 45 degrees. And Gary told me when we were making these notes, WSDA requires you to be able to show the process used to chill a bird to 45 degrees within 4 hours of killing.
Okay.
If you wanted to sell your birds, which probably most people listening aren't planning to do that. But we do everything according to practice as if we were selling it, just so that we're in the practice if we choose to. Dunking the bird right into ice water is perfect for this. And you need to have lots of ice on hand if you're butchering a lot of birds. I was trying to remember, Allison, I know I have it written down somewhere, but I was trying to remember how much ice I bought when we did 100 birds. I think about 200 pounds of ice. I can't remember.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot.
So if you can find a cheap source of ice, that's a good thing. Some people use freezers, like they have a freezer with ice and water in it, like a chest freezer.
I see. Okay.
If you're just doing one bird, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You can shove it into even just probably really cold water. But after you throw 50 hot birds into a bucket, that ice starts to melt. For storing your bird, okay, I'll cover both if you're going to pack them and if you're just going to eat it. So if a bird should be chilled fully, then you want to kind of drip dry. And Gary sets these up on a rack that he made out of PVC pipe. It doesn't really matter how you do it. And you can pat them dry with paper towels. If you're freezing the bird, you want to pat it really nice and dry before sealing, or you'll get lakes of water in the packaging and crystallization. And that's just not good for the flavor or the way it looks.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're just doing your hen like that, like you said, the garden hen or whatever for stew or broth, you still want to fully chill it for tender meat. So I am told. We haven't tried eating it right away. But we have So we have taken old hens that we already knew. We're like, there's no way we're eating this thing ever. It's like 2 pounds and gonna be tough as, shoes. But we've put that right into the pot because wasn't gonna eat the meat anyways. And the dogs ate it afterwards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's the bird done and dusted, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then the organs, you want to process and store them quickly, preferably within a day. Sometimes by the next day. Usually we finish all the butchering by nightfall, and then the next day we do all the organs. We package them into the size that we like to eat.
Okay.
The organs break down quickly, though. They don't last long. So we chill them
so
very
you need to get
quickly.
to those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If there's a day that Gary's doing a couple birds, not very many, I'm inside working in the kitchen, and I just use the organs right when they come in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's traditionally, I think, what would have been done, at any butchery.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we usually start a pot of broth. We throw some necks and feet and things in right away the same day that we butcher. So the next morning we have broth. So that's it. Then clean everything.
Phew. Then clean everything. Doesn't it always end that way? Then
or
clean everything.
It will smell, especially if you're doing it in the summer. So again, we don't bleach it. Yeah. We just clean everything. Then Gary has like dedicated scrubbers and sponges that he uses just for this. And he heats scalding water again in the scalding pot after he cleans it. Mm-hmm. And then he has hot water out there and he scrubs everything and sanitizes everything. And I just do the same thing inside. Birds aren't super greasy, so they're pretty easy to clean up after. And then we hang, drip dry, we invert, everything sits and air dries. And then you probably want to take a shower and then you want to eat something. So there you go.
Wonderful. Okay, so if listeners are wanting to go ahead and do this, take Andrea's information and make notes and use it, but do consider coming onto Discord because we've got a thread, as I said, dedicated to home butchering, and Andrea regularly posts information on there and photos when she does a butchering, and you can ask whatever you want. You can ask any question about butchering. We're happy to field questions.
And Gary's in there now too.
Is he? Oh yeah.
So
he'll
you can
be
ask
fielding
Gary
even more questions. Okay. How do you want to round up, Andrea? Is there anything that we've missed or anything else you want to share?
I've probably missed something, but if people have further questions, like you said, throw it in the Discord or pop it over to wherever. How do people ask us questions, Allison? I don't even know. Do they email you?
Sometimes they email me. Yeah.
Okay.
I get quite a lot of questions on email. Because we don't do Instagram anymore, really. So it's we're busy on Discord all the time. We don't have time for Instagram.
Find us somehow. What to say?
Find us.
Yeah.
Telepathy. And we will put the resources that you talked about in the show notes, the book and the courses. And also you talked about making that list of equipment and putting it onto the Patreon treasure trove.
Yeah.
And potentially it'd be wonderful if you could do a video, probably of Gary, next time you do a poultry butchering, and we could get that video up and share it as well with patrons. That would be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. If somebody offers or asks you to help them butcher chickens, and you haven't done it before, I would say jump at the chance. They probably can't pay you. They probably can't even give you a bird to take home because they're usually so expensive by the time you finish raising them that it's hard to give them up. But if somebody asks, do you want to help for a day just to learn? People pay hundreds of dollars to go to those workshops.
Yeah.
So, people spend a lot of money to go to those workshops. So if you get the chance to help somebody for free and it doesn't cost you anything, do go and do it.
Jump on it. Yeah.
Because everything that I've said needs to happen with your hands in order to understand.
Yeah.
So
wonderful. Well, thank you. I think the information that you shared is invaluable to listeners, and I'm sure that they're feeling a lot more confident than they were when they started listening. So thank you ever so much for sharing. And say thank you to Gary for us too.
I will.
For all the tips and tricks that he's worked out. And
yes.
So we can share those with the listeners. It's wonderful. Thank you.
I will. All right, Allison.
I'll speak to you again.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Allison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.